Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining the First National Forum of State Legislators, sponsored by Apprenticeship for America. I'm Jim Rosapep, a state senator for Maryland and a founding board member of Apprenticeship for America. It was founded about 2 years ago by a wide range of apprenticeship champions, some in the public sector, some in the private sector, some in unions, with employers, think tank people, others who care about scaling apprenticeships in the United States. Let me ask our policy director, Marianne Lasanti, to run through the agenda before we get started.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim, and I'm happy to do that. Today, welcome everyone. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about our mission for AFA, the forum purpose, and our desired outcomes. We're going to talk a little bit with you about apprenticeships globally and what they look like. I'll give you a little snapshot of apprenticeships in our 50 states. Then we're going to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about what you're doing. So a little bit of brag and borrow, and then an open discussion on how we can help you, and then summarize the ideas that we've heard here today, and then talk about some resources and our next steps. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. So our mission is to scale up apprenticeships across the United States, preserving the great strengths we have in the traditional apprenticeships in the construction trades, manufacturing, some other areas, but expanding them in healthcare, in IT, in public services, in business services, in truck driving, in all the areas of workforce shortage we have, and all the opportunities for good jobs we have for young people. We're going to talk a little bit today about how other countries have done this. Most people who are involved with apprenticeships in legislatures know that Germany, Austria, Switzerland have had very robust apprenticeship programs across industries and occupations, actually starting for young people, high school age. They've had that for generations. More recently, the United Kingdom and Australia and France and Canada, which were pretty much in the situation we are today, where it's limited primarily to construction, they expanded it across industries very, very successfully. And so what Apprenticeship for America is about is bringing that to the United States and bringing it at scale across the United States. We have a bipartisan board of directors of apprenticeship champions from different backgrounds. We have an advisory council made up of others who share our interests. And in fact, at the end of this call, we're going to ask you if you'd like to join our advisory council. There are some states that have done a great deal in these areas, some that have done less, but we all can learn from each other. The other aspect of this is the role of intermediaries, is the experience in other countries, the experience in the United States, is setting up apprenticeships is a specialized service. And not everybody can do it. And that's why there's specialists who do it. They do it in the union construction trade sector. They do it in the non-union construction trade sector. They do it in IT. They do it in healthcare. There's a whole movement across the United States now to stand up teacher apprenticeships, and there are folks who are doing that. So what we're about is helping everybody scale up. In the case of legislators, obviously, it's about state policy and state budgets. And so we're anxious to learn from you, learn how we can be of help to you. With that, let me turn it back to Marianne.
Thanks, Jim. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about apprenticeships globally, just kind of to set the stage of where the United States is compared to other nations. So I wanted to give you a little snapshot of the percentage of the labor force that are apprenticeships in other countries, including the United States. This graph illustrates that. It's probably a little depressing if you take a look at it. So the percentage of labor force in each country is illustrated in this colored graph. In the United States, the percentage of apprentices in our labor force is only 0.38% of our total labor force. In the United Kingdom, it's 1.86%. In Canada, 2.06%. In Australia, 2.51%. So you can see we have a lot of growth to achieve to be able to meet our the other countries that we consider to be our closest allies, and countries that are very much like us that we compete most likely with. So I think this gives you a very good illustration of where the United States can grow in our labor force when it comes to apprenticeships. Next slide, please. We also wanted to give you some fun facts about apprenticeships in the United States, because I'm sure since all of you are joining us from actually all over the country, and I'm so pleased that by the enthusiasm of everybody that's attending from all of our everyone that's joined us today. We have representatives from all 50 states, including the Virgin Islands. So from all of our folks that are on here on the call today, we know that you support apprenticeships and you've done lots of legislation, but we wanted to give you a little bit of information to think about. First and foremost, only 1/3 of Americans earn a college degree by the age of 25. So what that means is when employers recruit children or kids with college degrees, they are missing 2/3 of the labor force. So think about that. 2/3 of the labor force is being missed when you only recruit kids with a college degree. And when you look at public funding, we only spend $1 per apprentice compared to $50 for each college student. And when you marry that statistic with the one above, it starts to paint a very interesting picture of where our public funds are going for who. Also, 60% of all apprenticeship opportunities in the United States are for construction trades, but the fastest growing occupations for apprentices are outside of construction trades, and they're in fields like IT, healthcare, manufacturing, and public service. What that tells policymakers like yourselves is that we should be focusing our policy on those growing occupational sectors like IT, healthcare, and manufacturing. So out of those more typical construction trades that we've historically been focusing our dollars on. So at Apprenticeship for America, what we are trying to do is simply build the American workforce and be labor sector agnostic. Next slide, please. I wanted to give you an idea of what's happening in our 50 states, what type of legislation all of you are passing. I know you're all very busy and you're getting ready to prepare for your upcoming legislative sessions. So I did a little deep dive as to what type of legislation you've been passing in the last 2 years. So during the 22-23 legislative session across the nation, can you believe that 259,000 bills were filed? You all have been very busy in your respective House and Senate chambers. Of that, 34,400 bills were enacted and became law. So you've all been very, very busy. But of those 34,000 bills that were enacted, guess how many of them had anything to do with apprenticeships? Less than 3,000 bills have been filed in the last 2 years that had anything to do with apprenticeships, and only 337 of them were passed into law. And what kind of subject matter did they deal with? Well, here's the buckets that they really were focused on. I'm sure you could guess construction trades and licensed occupations were the lion's share. About 200 bills were passed into law that dealt specifically with construction trades and licensed occupations. Manufacturing and agriculture, about 128, which is typical because they have been where apprenticeship programs have been historically focused. Healthcare and teachers is another area where we're starting to see an uptick. We have in the last 2 years, mainly because of COVID. About 112 bills were passed nationwide over the last 2 years. And finally, employer incentives, only about 55 bills passed in the last 2 years that gave direct incentives, whether they were tax credits or incentives to employers. So that gives you a real picture of what's going on in the legislation that all of you have been passing over the last 2 years in legislatures all over the country. Now that you understand what's happening globally and in our 50 states, it's time for us to listen to you. So we have a segment called Brag and Borrow. We want to know what you're doing in your state. So we want you to brag about what you're doing and invite all of you to borrow from what other people in other states are doing that could help you forward your apprenticeship agenda. So now is time to raise your hand or put in the chat some legislation or some questions that you have or problems that you'd like to solve in your state to help scale apprenticeships across America.
It helps the employer and the apprentice by having their technical training for the apprenticeship done in high school, which is paid for by the public, as opposed to having to pay college tuition or the employer having to pay for the related instruction. So there are a lot of strategic advantages of starting in high school. It's something that Apprenticeship for America is promoting and has some background material on that we can share. And would love to continue that conversation.
Yeah, I think it's Kevin Crutchfield again. I think it's critical we get into the high schools because these kids don't know about these opportunities until they get out of high school. We might lose them. We might not have a chance.
Absolutely.
And Representative Rhoda Taylor from Georgia confirmed that they do have apprenticeships for high school students in Georgia. So thank you for weighing in.
Yeah, can you hear me? This is Chuck Goodrich.
Yes.
Yes.
I just wanted to comment. I'm from Indiana, and it sounds like I'm also an electrical contractor, so I'm in the trades, and I think this year was probably one of the best years we had on not so much just apprenticeships, but what we call career scholarship accounts. And so we were able to fund through our through the state a career scholarship account where actually parents and kids can sign, parents and high school kids 10th, 11th, and 12th can sign up for a scholarship account that allows them to get a private credential along with their diploma. What we're talking about is currency for high school kids, including a diploma, not just the high school diploma. And so we also have a work-based learning high school diploma here. And so we've got kids all over the state of Indiana, not only in the trades, but in CNA, in teachers, and every one of those kids that sign up for a career scholarship account started this year for the first time. We passed it in July, or we passed the last legislative session, started in July, can use that money at any private provider that's approved by the Treasurer's Office of the Department of Ed. So for instance, if you're a OJ, if you want to get your OJT, one of the problems we have with OJT,
RTI.
No, gee, many Christmas. CDLs.
Oh,
We need a lot of CDL drivers.
yeah.
The schools are having trouble paying for the actual driving the truck. So now a private provider teamed with the high school can get that private credential in a youth apprenticeship or private for like a CDL if they're going to drive apprenticeship. But I think what's really key about House Bill 1002 was that it literally put the money in the hands of the parent and the student outside of school funding to get a private credential. And so I'm an electrical contractor, like I told you. And so we have what we call prep academies. They're registered with the Federal Department of Labor, and they literally spend the 2 years getting a credential in the electrical field in private businesses that are private providers getting paid for through our career scholarship account. So I really love that bill. I think it changes everything. Right now, we just started off with kind of a pilot of 1,000 students, and next year I think we go to 3,000. So anyway, I just wanted to comment on that because I think apprenticeship is one thing, but I think credentialing is key, especially to getting folks in our healthcare industry.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Can I speak? Is it my turn here? Representative Michael Carbone, Arizona.
Go for it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So my question is, and I just discovered this past summer, talking to some of our cities. One of the challenges that we discovered is that we have this corporate, I'm going to call it corporate general contracting system, where it's just the folks that can afford to do it at the big level. Is there anything out there that can help promote, young folks to get into the trades, outside the trades, to get into general contracting to help offset some of the housing issues? If you look at it, if you could start out 10 in 1 year, and within 5-10 years, you can have a goal of maybe having 1,000 of these guys that start out to small to mid-sized type of contractors. fulfilling that small gap that we're not seeing, at least in our state. Is there anybody out there that is familiar with that or have any ideas or suggestions?
Is it Representative Carbone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's Representative Acker. I'm in the building trades in Connecticut, and we don't have any kind of restrictions like that for general contractors. You can essentially, we have a registration for home builders and remodelers. You just register, and you have to have a liability insurance. And other than that, you're up and going.
Right, but okay, so that's one area. But how can we promote that side of it? Because we don't have enough builders. You know, we don't have enough laborers, right? But then we also don't have enough people building homes. And so we have the same system. You can go and get here. They do a contractor's license. You have to apply for all that. I'm just wondering if there's a way to help promote that through an apprenticeship to get people thinking, well, I don't want to just be a plumber. Maybe my goal is to actually build, right?
Yeah.
And maybe my build capacity, my first 5 years is 1 to 10 units a year, which is a very good wage and achievable. The challenge is, and I think apprenticeship would help because folks don't have access to capital like these corporate folks do. They don't have all this. I think if we could start an industry, that trade system to maybe help those folks. And I have a background in construction and it's very difficult where we live. And I'm trying to find ways to solve that or come up with a solution because there isn't any. And I'm going to give you an example. I'll take Goodyear, Arizona. Just had this conversation a month and a half ago. I asked the city, one of the fastest growing cities in the country. I said, last year, how many people that you have in contractor level developed units and how many? And last year they developed one single family unit and the year before it was one single family unit. But they have 11,000 homes in the pipeline through corporate contractors. You see,
Yeah.
we need to fill that gap. And so they can pick up those smaller 10, 20 units a year, not these, and maybe they'll grow into a big corporation, but that's workforce. Did you see what I'm asking? Do you see?
Mhm.
Yeah. Can I weigh in on that, Jim?
Please.
Great.
Yeah, so in Connecticut, I've been working, we have the Home Builders and Remodelers Association. They're actually national. And they're starting a pipeline program, and they actually started in middle school and bring it into the high school. So it's a program they're starting now, and it does, I think, targets what you're trying to do. Let's get people into the building trades and understand the building trades. But you don't wait till high school because sometimes people have already chosen a path there. Start to get them, interested in the middle school area, and then they can use what some of the other states are mentioning.
I'm trying to.
Some of the other states have mentioned programs in high school. But
That's actually, I like to, you could share that. That'd be great. We have the Home Builders Association here. But, and I've talked with them and they don't have any, they agree with this, the problem. We're getting a little echoing.
We are.
yeah, quite a bit. Of
Sometimes it's.
Hopefully our tech folks are being able to deal with that. We do need apprenticeships in IT, by the way, just saying. So let me pick up on a question that the last question that popped up from Adrian Plank. Could Adrian introduce himself and kind of where he's from? Maybe having trouble getting on. The question is, he says the biggest problem with apprenticeships is transportation. Who has a solution to this problem? Do I understand the question? Go ahead. Oh, it's getting worse.
This is Chuck Goodrich. I was going to tell you what we were doing is we just made transportation part of the provider's funding. And so they can provide transportation and get reimbursed for the cost, which has helped tremendously because that's where the transportation needs to exist, especially in the trades.
Gotcha. That's
for our high school kids, getting from the high school to the private provider can now be paid for. The school pulls a general liability policy. The business would pay for the transportation or the provider.
Thank you very much. And refresh our memory on where state you're from.
Oh, Indiana.
And yeah, that's right. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. No, that's very helpful. That's something we can follow up on. The other thing that I wanted to throw into the transportation bucket, though, is I don't know how it is in other states, but in Maryland, about 30 years ago, we took driver's ed out of the schools and made it private, which works fine for middle and upper middle class people who can pay for driver's ed for their kids, but doesn't work that well for working class and poor kids. And as a result, one of the biggest complaints that we get from employers, as well as from unions, is that the young kids not only can't, they don't know how to drive, they don't have driver's licenses. And so one of the initiatives that we are exploring in Maryland, we haven't done it yet, is putting driver's ed back in the schools, at least for kids who are in high school apprenticeship programs.
I would just only address that we also included the cost. One of the things that we've seen was a huge income problem was it's $600 in Indiana. I have no idea what is in Connecticut or Maryland, but $600. And so we've added that into being able to be part of the transportation also as the driver's training.
Gotcha. Thank you. Oh, also, Representative Carbone mentions the junior high program, exposing people to careers earlier on. Again, one thing that we have done in Maryland as part of our education reform initiative is we created a stream of state revenue that goes to our local workforce boards to hire and train career counselors, not college counselors, not regular school counselors, but career counselors. It's based on the Swiss system. In Switzerland, their local workforce agencies send experts on different careers into the middle schools and say, have you thought of this career? Have you thought about that career? They take kids out on field visits to visit different kinds of employer settings. And then in the Maryland model, for the kids who have reached their proficiency in math and English and they're ready to look for a job or do dual enrollment, the career counselors work with will be working with the individual students to identify which apprenticeships to apply for. Adrian Plank is asked to be unmuted. Any luck?
Along those lines, this is Kevin Crutchfield with North Carolina. We actually have reached out. Prior to COVID, we were having pretty good success with getting middle schoolers to come visit our facility. But then COVID hit and that all ended.
All right, can you all hear me?
Mm-mm.
We hear an echo.
Somebody must have it on their phone and on their computer.
Yeah. Sorry about this.
You hear me now?
Yes. Yes, I can hear you.
All right, well, you all asked me to tell you who I am. I'm Adrian Plank. I'm a freshman legislator out of the state of Missouri.
Great.
And I'm also a union carpenter, so I'm familiar with apprenticeships.
Great. You've lived the dream.
Yeah, and so that was part of my issue is, you know, especially when we're dealing with high schools, where the biggest problem is transportation. If you're doing trades of any sort, and especially in construction, there's different job sites to be at certain times. So transportation is a big issue.
It makes good sense. And it is for lots of them with high school students, which is why these strategies of reimbursements and subsidized programs and getting driver's ed back in the high schools are all parts of strategies that some states are pursuing. But I think that's an issue that A4A ought to really take on to deal with. Oh, we can see Adrian too.
Ah, hate to spoil you.
You look good. Other issues, comments, questions, folks want to throw into the mix. We don't have to keep you all day.
We do want to move on and ask people how we can help them. We also have, I see Delegate Sigmund's. I think she's been trying to talk for a bit too. Let's grab.
Hi, I'm Delegate Shelley Simons. I am in the Virginia House of Delegates. And before I got to the House, I was the chair of a regional career and education center. And one of the issues we had was insurance for apprentices and students who wanted hands-on training who were under 18. So I wondered if any of you had any ideas about basically employers saying that their insurance would not cover students who were in the workshops, in the workplace, under 18 years old. And then I would also love if you could put in the chat or send us out the career counselors legislation that you passed in Maryland. Thanks.
Sure. Anybody else want to pick up on the workers' comp thing? I'm happy to make some comments on it. But does anybody else
In
like
North-
to make comments on workers' comp?
In North Carolina, I believe the school system picks up the workers' comp costs.
I believe that's true in a number of other states too. However, this is an issue that we just dove into in Maryland because we were hearing that from various folks. And I got with our insurance commissioner, and I subsequently got with the general counsel for one of the big staffing companies that has apprenticeships actually in Kentucky. And what I was told, and we can nail this down, I've asked our insurance commissioner for a letter. She says that the only reason that an employer would pay more workers' comp insurance when they hire a 16 or 17-year-old apprentice is because it's another worker. They don't have different rates for folks who are 16 or 17 versus 18 or 19. She said basically, and I talked with one of our workers' comp companies too in Maryland, they said that is someplace between an urban myth and an excuse by an employer that don't want to do it, but not something that is driven by the actual pricing. The pricing of workers' comp is driven by the number of employees, the hours worked, and that employer's record with workers' comp claims. It is not prospective in terms of it's going to cost you more because the apprentice is 16 or 17 instead of 18 or 19. But we can get you that documentation.
Jim, this is Representative Ackert again on that topic.
Yep, please.
Ours is very similar, identical, actually. It goes by job classification, what they're actually doing. So if they're, an apprentice, in some cases, they're doing lesser than the, whoever's their sponsor. So sometimes their rates are a little bit lower typically. It just depends on what exposure they have to harm, like any other workers' comp claim. So it doesn't go by, in our age doesn't have a factor in it either.
Thank you very, very much. That's something that we at AFA need to document for everybody's benefit and promote.
Yeah, this is Chuck Goodrich again. The only issue that we have is if they're under 18, then there are certain tools and how they handle lift equipment, how many hours worked. But we give them a card, they keep it in their pocket. Our supervisors know it, and works out pretty well. That was really the only issue we had with the workers' rule from the Department of Labor. But workers' comp, I agree with what everybody said. We based on job classification.
Thank you. That's very helpful. There's another Marion. There's another representative that can't figure out how to get into the conversation. Representative Pamelia, I don't see her last name. Well, while we try to solve that problem, Representative Nate Robertson, I guess. Are you able to speak, Representative? Well, I will then just read the question. It seems to me that a lot of these programs that are being talked about as high school pre-apprenticeship courses were previously considered shop class. The elimination of funding for this education has created many of the issues we are seeing at new apprentices enrolling in local programs. Amen. I think all of us who work in this field, or most of us, I think, have very much that same perception. The one difference is that shop class or vocational education or even pre-apprenticeship courses are courses. They're not apprenticeships, because apprenticeship is classroom instruction and on-the-job training in a paid job. That's what makes apprenticeship different from traditional career and technical education or vocational education in the high schools. And another representative, LaRoque, oh no, I'm sorry, it's Representative Senator Gulick from Vermont, I apologize, talked about CTE and providing credentials. It was asking where do apprenticeship programs reside. It's a great question. It varies by state in terms of where the high school level of a registered apprenticeship fits in. So that varies by state. And that's something where we could pull together some information on options that you can look at it in your own state. But because they are registered apprenticeships with the on-the-job training and the classroom instruction, they have to be approved by your state apprenticeship agency, which is generally, I think maybe always, but certainly generally in your state labor department. So it requires cooperation between the school systems and the labor department. Marianne, any other questions from the chat that you want to?
We actually have one from Natalie Zillan Nars.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Go ahead,
Okay,
Natalie.
thanks. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to be on the call. I'm also a first term House rep in Minnesota. And I think the thing that's shocking to me, I've been in healthcare for 30 years, and when I'm touring high schools right now, it's clear to me we need to bring health occupations back to the classroom. Health occupations classes occurred when I was in high school. That's how I became a CNA. So there was a pathway right in high school in the 80s. And when I was doing that, many of my friends were building a house. You had the shop class, you had, the skills to learn everything to build the house right on the property. And they all went into the trades. A lot of them created businesses, became business owners. And I think over the years in the district I represent, one of the schools out of the 4 districts has a what I would say a solid trades program. They have a culinary arts program, and they have a pathway, for prosperity for kids without a 4-year degree. And they're tracking it in to your point at a middle school level. And I think it's really important that we, some of the things we threw on the wayside with just pushing the 4-year degree, we go back to some of these common sense. And I've been working with the unions to talk about ways where people under 18 can be on the job for shadowing at 16, 17 years old, so that they can see welding, they can see sheet metal, they can see roofing, they can see building, they can be watching it until I can figure out how to work through the hands-on piece. That's one thing. And then the second thing outside of getting it back to the classroom is working with OSHA. I've got a situation where at 16, I could use the mechanical lifts in a nursing home. You have to lift people that are not one-person transfers. And OSHA at a federal level has made laws that prohibit a 16-year-old to use the equipment. They want you to be with another person that's over 18. So it makes another barrier where you can't have the person that's been trained to be the CNA use the equipment. And so my position is just like getting the driver's ed back, and we've got to work with these labor departments at the state and OSHA to get them all to match, to follow the initiatives we're trying to do. And I'm learning as we go how to try to do that. And it's a lot of pieces at one time, but we've dismantled so many things that worked, we're finding. And now we have a housing shortage, a trade short. We have a shortage in all these infrastructures of police and teachers and everything. So I think it's going to take, a lot of really aggressive things. So it's been fascinating to listen. And, I'm curious if anybody else has been working with OSHA.
This is Jim Rosenpep again. I have not heard the OSHA issue, but we'll put it down the list and we'll look into the OSHA issue. What we have had, which I don't know if other people have run into for the high school kids working, is age discrimination, where employers say, not for workers' comp reasons, but just policy. We only hire people 18 years and older.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we checked out our law in Maryland. That's against the law in Maryland. Our anti-age discrimination law applies to young people as well as older people. And I talked with the deputy director of our Civil Rights Commission who enforces our civil rights laws. And he said, you're absolutely right. It's against the law. We've never gotten a complaint. And I said, so what can we do about it? And what he said was, he said, if you hear of anybody doing that, I will call the employer and let them know what the law is. So I would encourage folks to look at your state laws to see if your anti-age discrimination law covers young people as well as old people, because that's another thing like the OSHA restriction, where we say it's legal to work, but then we say we won't hire you. That doesn't make any sense.
Okay, we have about 12 more minutes. So should we move on? Because we want to ask people how we can help you in our next round. So now that you've heard everything, all the great things that are happening across the country, this is the point where we turn to you and say, what can we do to help you at AFA? What kind of resources do you need? What would you like to see us do next time? What can we help you as you start to prepare for your next legislative session? So what can we do to help you?
Marianne?
Yes.
Well, I've already looked up Representative Goodrich's bill there, that one that he was mentioning. So I think sharing some of the bills that have been put out, I think would be great. As a House Bill 10-1002. I already looked that one up while we're on the chat. So I thank him for bringing that information forward. So I think anything like that, that or any ideas, if there's a way that we have continue a communication, further meetings, whatever.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
Hey, does anybody know of any programs for, we have several prisons in our state, and so some of these folks are about to get out and also need financial opportunities, and that's a great way to go too with the apprenticeship programs. So if you all have anything to encourage that.
That's a very good idea. And there was a leader of one of the major international unions who was telling me the other day about a program they're involved in, specifically starting in the prisons. I think that's a really good idea. And that might be something that there are other people interested in. Let us know, and we'll try to get people together just to talk about. That's a very specific area, but it's I think a very interesting one.
One other.
I also see Representative Cruz from Arizona. Looked like you wanted to say something and didn't get a chance to. If you want to speak, you're welcome to. If you're still on. Nope. Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
Marianne, one more from Tim from Connecticut.
Hi, Tim.
Sure.
We have in our manufacturing pipeline, if a apprentice completes the manufacturing apprenticeship, they get the company gets a $7,500 credit, tax credit. And if they complete a construction apprenticeship, that company gets a $4,000 credit for each apprentice. So there's for incentives to encourage hiring apprentices.
Those are good suggestions. Let me ask this question of the group. Are any of you doing anything with public service apprenticeships? I mean, our state agencies have workforce shortages like everybody else. And state governments do lots of things. They do transportation, they do education, they do healthcare. There's lots of business services. Are any of you or your governments working on any public service state apprenticeships? Well, let's in follow up to this, if anybody has some leads or suggestions on that, we'd love to share that, because we're very similar in those regards. and I think, and it's an area where the legislature and the governors can lead, because obviously we have more control of our own employment policies than we do over private sector employment.
Absolutely. Is there anybody else? I thought I saw a couple people. Is there anybody else? Michael Cahill, are you still on the line?
I am. I was sort of late to the topic on what we're doing in our state, which we do quite a bit. I put a list of the offerings at our local career technology center. We have about 24 of those across our small state, a little less than 1.4 million people. Our problem here is that people don't take those courses or don't take the building trades very much, and you can't get a plumber when you need one. And part of the problem is they push for the 4-year degree and the higher, very high earnings. Of course, if you have to pay a plumber, you know that they're doing well. But our problem, I think our main problem is demographics. We're an older state, and we just don't have the people. You know, our school enrollment is falling. We just don't have the people. As much as we try to make these opportunities available, even the CTE schools have summer programs for junior high, to sort of plant the seed early. So we're doing a lot, but again, we just need a few more people. And I know our big success back in the 90s was luring people to New Hampshire. So we'd like to send some young people here, and maybe that would help solve our demographics.
A good cause, a good cause. Let me make one comment on your point about the schools pushing people to education. That statistic that Marianne cited at the beginning, that despite all the College for All movement, today only 1/3 of high school graduates earn any degree by the age 25. So the kids are voting with their feet. The problem is we're not connecting them early enough, as everyone said on this call, to great, productive, worthwhile, and remunerative careers. And one of the ways that California has tried to approach this, and that Maryland has tried to approach it, there may be other states, and you on the call would know, is there was a movement about 10 years ago, some of you may have noticed, to set a goal in the states that 55% of high school graduates should have gotten a degree by the age of 25. It didn't happen. The average now across the country is still in the low 40s or even lower in some states. But that's how we came up in Maryland with our goal of 45% of high school kids should have completed the high school level of registered apprenticeship by 2031. I must say, setting that goal very publicly by the legislature, putting it in law, and then putting it in the accountability metrics for the school systems. One of our colleagues on the call talked about getting these things in the accountability metrics for the school system, has really gotten the attention of our schools. I mean, big time. And they don't quite know how to do it, but they're scrambling to learn how to do it. And that's why getting these career counselors in from the workforce boards, but they're all looking at, are they offering the CTE programs that will be the related instruction for the apprenticeships? So that's another way to look at it. We can send you some information about that. It's another way to get their attention.
Thank you, Senator. Our local high school had a career day on last month. All sorts of people in for the community invited to come in and tell students what careers they did and what they found rewarding in them. And unfortunately, that was our veto day, so I missed it.
I understand. I hope one of your bills didn't get vetoed.
There's a question from Natalie. Are there any examples of school districts who have purchased land to build homes each year and then sell for community to grow and then have new houses each year, steps to create business partnerships and grow apprenticeships? I'm not particularly aware of that, but maybe somebody else is.
Don't know.
No. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and move along. Just to follow up with everybody, and we had a great discussion today. Just kind of looking over some of the notes from today. We talked about partnerships with employers, particularly small employers, and the need for states to have strategies to engage particularly small employers, that credentialing was important, that support services, we need to focus on support services and looking at our government agencies and looking at the barriers between different agencies within state government and federal government and how they interact, and if they are causing barriers to create apprenticeship programs. We talked about creating pathways for apprenticeship programs and career development starting in the middle school. We talked about insurance, particularly for young people, and the liability issue, particularly with workers' compensation. We talked about issues in the supply chain and jobs that are maybe not that are in shortages, whether it's in healthcare, in truck drivers, and other in trades, in other shortage areas. So there was a lot of conversation. We're also going to grab a lot of the comments that were in the question and answer. So there's a lot of issues that that everybody has brought to the table, and a lot of conversation. And as far as things that you'd like to hear from us, obviously sharing of legislation. There's a lot of great bills that are going on across the country, and what I'm hearing from all of you is that you want us to be a depository of that and continue to engage with you and share some of that information. Also, maybe create a newsletter, particularly during the legislative session. We also want to be a resource to you. We have some folks on staff and within our network that have studied this issue. One of our founders is at the Urban Institute. He has studied. He's one of the premier economists in the country when it comes to not only apprenticeships but economic policies that is available to us, and has written and studied the issue of workforce development and apprenticeships. So we're here to help you, and please reach out to us. We'll give you our contact information on the last slide. So I guess at this point, I'll turn it over to Jim for next steps.
Well, thank you, Mary Ann. Thanks for everybody on the call. The turnout was much greater than we were expecting, and I think it reflects exactly what's going on in the country and the response that legislators in both parties are taking to try to solve these workforce shortages and help these young people at the same time. We will follow up on these suggestions that have been made. We will plan additional programs like this. One thing I'd like you to think about, we'll do a follow-up email to you, respond at that time, is each of you are welcome to join the advisory council for apprenticeship for America. All that requires is you hear me? Did you hear me at all? Can you hear me?
Can hear you now.
You can hear me. Okay. Did you hear what I was saying before? It all of a sudden muted me. That's what I'm asking.
Most of it.
Most. Okay, good. I don't repeat myself. Sorry about that. Anyway, when you get a follow-up email from us, if you're interested in joining the advisory council, it'll just mean we'll list you on the website. You'll be on a list of advisory council members. We occasionally have a briefing for advisory council members who are not just state legislators, but they include employers, they include unions, they include public officials, they include think tanks and other people. If you're interested, please sign up for that. There's no responsibility. You don't have to show up if you don't want to. Just give us advice if you want to. Secondly, if you could identify beyond what has been raised here, specific areas of interest. One of the things that I noticed from one of the people in the chat was about teacher apprenticeships. There's a lot going on with teacher apprenticeships across the United States. I think it was a legislator from Minnesota talked about nursing apprenticeships. Lots of going on about nursing apprenticeships. One thing we didn't talk about in this call, but there's a lot going on, is information technology apprenticeships. That's a booming area because there's a shortage of information technology. So if there are particular industries or occupations that you're interested in, if you could identify them for us, both ideas you have and things you're pursuing, but also things you'd like information about, you'll be able to direct our staff to be a little more responsive to you in terms of what you're interested in. And continue just to be in direct touch. We're in this for the long term and want to help you in every way we can. And thanks so much for joining us, and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.